I tell you, we ship a lot of our raw material out there. But if we could keep those raw material, the hides and skins, and add value to them and create value addition projects, that will actually be absolute places where we add value and create industries that now make leather jackets, leather shoes for export purposes. So I'm saying this to say that if we can just translate these policies that have been spelled out, and you will see the budget, for me, was a well thought out budget by there, is now translating those budgetary policies into action plans by creating actual industries that take advantage of these resources that we have. We have the raw material, we have the people, we have this skill set that we are talking about, the youth, unemployed youth, brilliant people that have come out of university. How can we gainfully engage them? So again, it's a journey. I want to believe that the government has reached the realization right now that we are at crunch time. This has to be addressed. If we don't address it now, we will be playing with a time bomb that will be difficult. Because when you get people who are idle, who are educated, who are learned, roaming the streets, they will put those, again, the saying goes, an empty brain or an idle brain is the toolbox of the devil. You don't want the devil to enter those minds, those brilliant minds, and take advantage of them and create what we call a criminal society. So it's a journey, and I think it behoves each one of us within our own sphere of influence. At KISM, we are creating internship opportunities. We are motivating organizations to employ young people. You know, all these things are things that we have to work on an ongoing basis. So it's not a one-person responsibility. It's a responsibility of all of us. Government, private sector, public sector, all of us have to be engaged in how can we gainfully create opportunities for the youth to be gainfully employed.
I mean, I'll be coming back to you because I would want to find out, I mean, every year we get, you know, what one would call, you know, qualified data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, you know, giving us the picture on the ground about the rate of the job market, what I would call the job market in this country. And they would tell you that about 4 million young Kenyans, you know, are out of employment. And they have been giving us this data, you know, for the longest time possible. And the most interesting part is that, you know, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is under the Ministry, or is under the National Treasury, Department of Planning. And the question is this: is it that we do not interact with this data enough? Is it that we do not take this data seriously? Or is there a mismatch, you know, between what we do vis-a-vis what needs to be done? I want you to respond to that question. But for now, let's first of all have a look at, you know, our viewpoint question of the day. Of course, you know that we are talking about youth unemployment. Are you a young person? Have you been impacted by the ongoing unemployment rate in this country? And how are you dealing with these? The question that we have posed for you is, what should be done to create job opportunities for young people? What should be done to create job opportunities for the youth? We would like to hear your views. My Twitter handle is @O'Brien_Kimani, @KBC Channel 1. You know, get us through those Twitter handles. Karani, are you on Twitter?
Yes.
Do you mind sharing with us?
My guys, I'll give it to you just now.
All right. So Karani is also a man who is updated. He has a Twitter handle, so we'll also be throwing it to you so that you can get in touch with him. Actually, he is the chairperson of the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management. We'll also be talking about the issues of supply chain in this country and the issues of supply management as well. We'll be discussing those. But for now, we're talking about unemployment rate in this country. Every year, about 800,000 young people join the job market in this country. And we have seen the creation of National Employment Authority. And the question is, will it be able to deal with this animal that we call unemployment? Let's go back to the discussion with John Karani. I told you he's the chair, KISM. So
yes.
I had posed this question to you. Where is the disconnect? Where is the mismatch? I mean, we talk about creating jobs, you know, for young people. We talk about industrializing this country.
Yes.
We talk about attracting foreign direct investment in this country. And all these are geared towards creating gainful employment for our people.
Right.
But you see, we still have stubbornly high unemployment rate in this country. So where is the mismatch here? Is it that we create jobs for the wrong people, or we create wrong jobs for the right people? What happens actually?
So going back to, first of all, let me give you my Twitter handle, what we are like, KISM GT, at KISM GT. So that's KISM GT, at KISM GT. So it's a very tough question. Let me go back to the issue I told you about the ACPO programs. If you think about the ACPO programs that were initiated, a very well thought out program, by the way, these programs were directly meant to aid the youth in terms of creating employment opportunities, in terms of really creating opportunities for the youth to leverage their skill set. But what happened along the way? They were hijacked. They were hijacked by well-able-to-do people. They were hijacked with people who probably have the capital. So specific to this aspect of ACPO, I want to tell you that you got these youthful people with brilliant ideas, but they don't have the capital.
Yeah.
So you can see that automatically means that these brilliant youths that you have given this ability to think and to read from the university, and then you give them the opportunity through ACPO, can indeed create the companies, but they don't have the capital, the wherewithal to translate those ideas into businesses. So what happens? It gives the room for other people now to enter into that fray, take advantage of the youth, register the company under the youthful person there, but the person who is a beneficiary ends up not being the target market that was meant to be. So that's just one case in point, So we need to rethink and align this issue of ACPO, for instance, to enable them to actually directly benefit the youth. And I think that's what the government is trying to do in this stimulus program, because they have given some loans now whereby you can get kind of, some favorable rates to enable the youth inject capital into the idea. So that's one of them. But the other aspect, as I said earlier on, is how do these policies, these ideas, these brilliant ideas that are read out at the level of government, at the national treasury, national policy, get implemented on the ground? How do they actually get taken and then translated into actual action plans that are measurable? And because we have these budgets that we read, after a while, it's time to read another budget. But we have not gone back to say, did we gain results from the budget that was allocated? So these resources, again, are misallocated, for lack of a better word. And, Brian, you are in Kenya. Many resources are not just reallocated, but they're actually misappropriated. When the resources that are meant to create jobs and activities that lead to actual employment opportunities are diverted and used for other resources that are not non-revenue generating or non-employment generating, that is actually happening across many sectors of the economy. So we have these resources that we've been given, but we are not creating, we are not directing them at the right places, at the right resources, at the right activities to ensure that we have the jobs that we are looking for. So it's a whole ripple effect that's happening across the chain that is causing us now to end up losing out on the job market. And I believe we are at that stage where it's a wake-up time, really. If we don't wake up now, then it's going to be very risky for us as an economy. If we don't wake up right now to address and stem this issue that is slipping out of our control, then we have a challenge.
The government has gone ahead to create the National Employment Authority, with its clear mandate, of bringing down the number of unemployed people in this country, and of course, identifying opportunities in the market and identified potential, what we would call employees. What would you expect to see coming out of this authority going forward?
Yeah. So it goes back to the same issue that I told you earlier on. This is a very well thought out thing. Now, whether it will be implemented up to the letter, whether we get people who have the goodwill, the wherewithal to take this brilliant idea of the National Employment Authority and actually translate the plans, the activities into actual tangible activities that create employment is where, I keep saying this, the problem always happens at the action level, at the implementation level, at the monitoring level, so we have to take these brilliant ideas that have been spelled out in the National Employment Authority and have measurable deliverables that show us that at every stage we are saying we are on a journey and we are absolutely on track on delivering on the promises of that National Employment Authority. If we don't do that, if we put it there, 5 years down the road will come. I don't want to be a prophet of doom, but if we don't measure it, if we don't track it, if we don't have reporting back or monitoring, then I can tell you for sure, we'll report back in 5 years, you and I will be sitting, what happened again? So there need to be goodwill at both the policy level and the implementation level, right across the life of that project that has been that has been spelled out by the government. So how do we do that? It doesn't, the National Treasury will not do that. It takes the people who are doing the work. So it's a lot of people with goodwill that are willing to actually walk the talk of implementing the proposals of the national government. So that's where we have to go.
You see, the government talks about creating employment for young people, but when you look at the public service, the average age of a public servant is about 45, 48 years.
Very true.
So, do you think a public service that is dominated by people who do not fall into the bracket of young people is well suited enough to create jobs for people who are between the ages of 20 to 40 years?
Very good question, and you're very right. Public service is, I suspect you're being fair. It's about 50 probably. We have 45, almost to 50. And I think if we all have a mindset of saying that we are on a transition mode, that we are never permanent in a place, and we each take it as our duty, wherever we are. Again, it boils down to the individual responsibility, saying, me as John Karani, what can I do within my sphere of influence to ensure that I'm creating an opportunity for the next generation? It's not, the government cannot legislate that, because you also have to think about these people who are saying in public service. If you tell them to get out of the job market, where do they go? So as long as you've not created a pipeline of value which enables these people to transition out of the job market, but not into the village, you understand? But into some area where you actually are continuing to be gainfully employed, but you have already created a pipeline of it's called a mentorship program. One of the things that we have really missed out in this country is what we call an apprenticeship program. Apprenticeship means you have people who you take under your tutelage and take them through a mentorship program, so that by the time you exit the job market, you got somebody who is fully trained. Because can you imagine taking somebody from the university, maybe 20 years old, and can he really do the job that I've been doing at all these years? But there's got to be a deliberate, intentional agenda of mentoring young people, of taking them through that mentorship program and training program, so that by the time you now exit the marketplace, you actually have somebody who can take your job, who is also qualified. But the thing that you have to also say, what do you do with these people who are exiting the job market? Where are you sending them? You'll be creating another cadre of unemployed people who you are sending out of the job market because of the youth coming in. So it's not about just creating public service people to take over the jobs of the young people take over the jobs of the young people. It's a whole, you have to have a whole paradigm shift, so that we look at we expand the cake. We must expand the pie, so that we create beyond just a public service. So much as you got that route of the young people coming into the public service, that is only one aspect, but that is not enough. The jobs at the public service are actually probably fixed. They are probably in a department like maybe Interior, you have 1,000 people. Can you take more people to accommodate both the in-house people and the outcoming people? No. There must be a way of creating other opportunities. So we've got to have a shift completely, because Some of them may not even be able to do the jobs at the public service anyway, because it takes time to train them. It takes time for them to get into that stage where they have the sobriety and the maturity to do the services at the public service. But that's a journey we can talk about. But that is not enough. So we've got to create many, many other arenas or opportunities for young people to get gainfully employed. And that's the thinking we should have. We should have what I want to call a mindset that's we've got a lot of things we can do. The cake is big enough. How can we expand the cake? How can we create the opportunities? Because God has given us the resources. Agricultural sector, for instance, is one area that's been neglected for the longest time. And I have there's a talk of how can we translate agriculture into a business, for instance.
Agribusiness.
Agribusiness. And that's, to me, the biggest opportunity that we can actually add value. How can we create agricultural value addition, which is now encouraging people to get into agriculture, which we are always saying as Kenya, where our economy is 70% agricultural based. But are we really adding value to those agricultural products, or are we only producing raw materials that we don't add any value to, whether it is maize, whether it is wheat?
Actually 80% of our agricultural exports, here in primary form.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those are the things we need to really calibrate our minds and think about how can we take this agriculture, which is literally the mainstay of our economy, and translate it to agribusiness, business that helps everybody across the chain. And let's not look at this tunnel saying these people in the public sector, they have been there for too long. That's not enough. Even if we got all the public sector people to get out of job today, it will still not be enough to employ the youth. And anyway, will they be able to do their job? So that's what I'm saying. We need a paradigm shift and think about the vast opportunities that actually exist in our economy.
And a lot of people, have gotten to a point whereby they're saying it is high time we come up with a Marshall Plan, for young people, to create massive employment opportunities for them. Just like, the Marshall Plan that was crafted by Europe, after the World War, and we all know it worked wonders, for Europe. Is it high time, that we sat down and said, look here, if we don't deal with this pandemic right now, if we don't deal with this crisis right now, we are not likely to achieve our Vision 2030 development agenda. And if we were to develop, a Marshall Plan for job creation in this country, how should it look like and what should it entail?
So again, just to that point you've just said, I think we have what I want to call a burning platform this time. And I think much as the situation was already bad, this pandemic has given us the impetus, hopefully the urgency, and hopefully what I want to call the burning platform for a real plan, a real comprehensive plan that takes into account the variables that we have as a nation to create the. So if we as Honorable Mutai Kagwe always says, if we treat this disease normally, it will treat us abnormally. But it's the same thing with the youth and employment issue. If we continue treating it normally, the way we have treated it, and we believe that this incremental, what we've been doing is incremental opportunities for creation. We need a complete overhaul of our thinking. And I keep saying it's not the job of the national government alone. Much as the national government has the responsibility of creating the platform for people to bring our thoughts together, whether it's KEPSA in the private sector or the public service and the national treasury, all of us coming together. How can we, as a nation, take this as our problem, all of us, at the family level, at the individual level, at the national level, and come together and create, as you call it, a Marshall Plan that basically makes us come together as a nation, put our thoughts together, and create a But because it's got to be not just a plan, it's got to be an actualizable plan, a plan that we hold ourselves accountable for, to commit to make sure it actually gets implemented. So I keep going back to that aspect of what do we have in our hands as a Kenyan. What do we have? We have the resources, we have the land, we have the agriculture. How can we anchor this Marshall Plan on what we already have as a nation? How can we anchor everything that we do around for the digital space, for instance. Kenyans are brilliant in terms of the youth, for instance, very innovative. A lot of innovations happening in our youth in terms of technology. How can we leverage that and create hubs? And I think the budget has tried to address that, whether it's in terms of technology hubs like the Concert City. How can we make those now be places where our youth are gainfully employed? But all this, as you correctly say, I want to call it several pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. How can we bring it all together now and have a comprehensive plan that can be activated and actualized and to be able to translate into actual jobs? And I think that's what you are saying, really. We have so many plans, maybe all in different places. It's time. And the Vision 2030 that you alluded to was really brilliantly well thought out. Right now we are, of course, at that risk of saying, are we on track to achieving that? I believe it's still possible to achieve that, but we need a rethink, we need a rejig of and a recalibration of the whole methodology to our approach. So bring it all together, bring all the resources that we have together, and actually create a burning platform that now creates and bring this jigsaw puzzle together that helps us to now create the activities that will help us actualize the transformation plan. So I believe the will is there. It's now the impetus to implement that.
And that has always been the challenge. I mean, when you look at, 30 years of our national planning, I mean, dating back to the 70s, to the 80s, there has always been a strong-willed government to create more jobs than the market demands. And the question is, how do we always end up getting it right? And I want to take you back to 2007, 2008. After the country, got into a very serious post-election violence, and the dangers, of having an employed youth came into fore. After young people were hired to go and burn homes and kill people and cause mayhem to this country, and the government then, came together and said, "Hey, look here." We have realized that we can't move forward if we leave our young people behind. And that's when they started talking about creating county sheds, or what you would call constituency juakali sheds, to try and create employment for these people. That's when they came up with Kazi kwa Vijana initiatives, and all these initiatives. But they all ended up, falling by the wayside. And so when you look at it, I mean, you see there were good intentions, there were good plans, but I think we failed at the execution stage. And so the question is, we are very good at planning, but when it comes to execution, that's where we fail. How then do we rejig? How do we retweak? How do we rework on our implementation strategies?
So it calls for holding people accountable, really. And I think that's what, for the longest time, whether it's at our personal level or at a family level, if we don't have that mechanism of holding each other accountable for the delivery of the plans and the things that we have said we'll do, then we'll continue coming back and to the planning stage again, have these very brilliant plans, but it fails at the execution level. So how do we have a measurable, deliverable that can be tracked? And you don't wait until the end of the program to measure that. It has to be at every milestone. What are we on track? Are we on track? And that takes, again, an initiative that is, and I think the government had that at one time. I think it's still there. It's called project monitoring and that type of thing. I believe that is still there. It's a matter of making sure it's alive and constantly
It's actually under the National Treasury.
It's actually under the National Treasury.
Project implementation
something like
and
that.
Evaluation
I really believe it's there. So how do we give life and teeth to that? Because I think as long as people don't have, we're always told in this country, actions that we do have consequences. If we don't put consequences to people who take resources of the public and don't put them into the purpose for which it was intended,
Yeah.
then we'll continue having this problem for the longest time. So the question we have to ask ourselves, and probably it's beyond me and you, the will, how do we translate the will into actual actionable deliverables? And how do we hold people accountable in every sphere of influence, whether it is a county level, whether it's the same treasury level, for the delivery of programs that have been mandated, that have been very well planned. So as long as people feel that they can get away with that, and 1 year comes, you're told to construct this project, there's no road, another resource is put there, and people get it. So we create a culture of impunity, a culture where people come and believe they can get away with anything, and the deliverable, the project that they were intended to do, never gets delivered. We'll continue having that. So we need to have will, and I think the DCI are beginning to bite now. I really believe they're even going back into history where there's been misappropriation of resources that were meant for the public. So if we can now ramp that up so that people know that if you don't deliver on what you are told to deliver, there are serious consequences, we'll start beginning a real return to sense of normalcy in terms of delivering projects. And that's what we really need to do. How do we deliver projects that are value-adding? How do we deliver projects that were meant to be delivered by the resources and the plans that were allocated? And that's where the disconnect really happens. It's, again, it's an age-old problem. But, I think it's almost since independence. But we've come a long way, and there's still hope for us as a country if we can take the deliberate intention that if you don't do what you're supposed to do with the resources that were given to you, if you don't implement the project to the letter, there are serious consequences. I'm sure we'll see a turnaround. And we'll see that once you do everything that the budget says we do, I'm telling you, the jobs will not be a problem. There will be enough resources to go around. We have vast resources. We have vast budgetary plans, but we don't translate them into actual action plans that are measurable. So we need to measure them, we need to monitor them, we need to hold people accountable for the things that they are not delivering.
And as always, what we say, what can't be measured cannot be achieved.
Absolutely.
Well, where else do you get this kind of discussions? It's right here on the Biz Check. We are live from Broadcasting House. Your views are indeed welcome at O'Brien Kimani, at KBC Channel 1. And you see, you also have a Twitter handle at KSM.
Yes, KSM at KISM GT.
At KISM GT.
One word.
We welcome your views. We would absolutely want to hear your take on job creation in this country, the labor market in this country, and the rate of unemployment, what needs to be done. And remember, we have our question. Let me have a look at it, actually. Can we put the question on the screen, actually? Yeah, there you are. So the question is, what should be done to create job opportunities for the youth? Very simple. But we welcome your views on this. What should be done to create job opportunities for the youth? At O'Brien Kimani, at KBC Channel 1, at KISM GT.
Yeah.
You know, that's the Twitter handle for KISMS. We continue our discussion here. Remember, we're still tracking the events happening elsewhere in your counties, and of course our correspondent, as I told you, they're roaming this country, and of course we'll be crossing over to them and getting to understand what's happening in a place that is near you. But for now, we'll take a short break, and thereafter we are back with more.
Hamjambo wa Kenya wenzangu, mimi ni prosecutor. Niko hapa kusisitiza maagizo ambayo tunapewa na Wizara ya Afya kuhusu ugonjwa wa coronavirus. Tunaambiwa pahali pana watu wengi lazima tuweke distance, yani kuweka hatua mita 1 kwa mwenzako. Ukienda kwa matatu, weka distance. Ukienda kwa soko ama palipopote mkusanyiko wa watu, ni vizuri uweze kupeana hiyo social distance ili tuweze kumaliza maambukizi. Tukifuata haya masharti ama maagizo ambayo tunapewa na Wizara ya Afya, hakika tutaangamiza corona virus na hali yetu ya kawaida tutairudia. Asanteni sana.
On the next episode of
bahati nilionayo ya kuolewa na wewe.
Tujali kazi zenu
Joel Muthe alikuwa huko pete na wakaongea na bibi yangu wa Yune sana.
Nataka uwe macho, mtazame kwa makini sana.
Ai. Nani? Kwani watanimaliza?
I didn't know you were coming.
Wacha nikaangalia wa Yune.
Sawa.
Naona wako wote hapa Anafanya nini hapa?
Hilo jambo itabidi umuulize kama wewe mwenyewe.
Nitamuuliza, lakini pia na usisahau kitu moja. He'll always be loyal to us.
Kama kuna kasi anafanyia Chris, kuna venye hao wawili siwaamini.
Sipendi kuomba.
this weekend on KBC Channel 1.
I knew he was a wolf in sheep clothing. Way! Sakayo may be short, but he's not a wolf. I'm talking about Cha. Damn.
But you can just contact a peaceful group.
There is no such thing for students. Let me tell you, my people. Tutakula na kukunywa tiaga.
But Walimu told us to deal for ourselves. But I'm paying school fees for him to teach me these things. Otherwise, I'd buy books and read for myself.
You have really changed, eh? This backstabbing total of a character is not you.
I had to change.
Classmates, every Saturday on KBC.
Welcome back. You're watching BizCheck. We are live from Broadcasting House, and of course we continue to track events happening in the city, in the country, in Africa, and the rest of the world. And now we want to take you to the county of Mombasa, whereby, you know, the trial of Kilifi Deputy Governor continues. We now want to take you to Mombasa Law Courts, where Anboro is standing by, and that will be doing, you know, in a little while. So you had better stick here for that. We are tracking and trying to find out what exactly is happening there, and the case that has been going for the last 2 or so months. We would want to find out what is the latest there. So we shall be going to Mombasa in a while. But we are back in the studio to discuss unemployment in this country among the young people, and what we need to do about these. We have talked about, you know, creating a Marshall Plan for creating jobs for young people. And if I can take you back to the 1960s, you know, immediately after independence, you know, Kenya embarked on sessional number 10 that was meant to, number one, deal with poverty, health, as well as illiteracy. And on the issue of poverty, the whole plan was to create jobs, you know, through industrializing this country. And this is a debate that we have been having for quite a long time. And the question is, I mean, manufacturing is also part of the Big Four agenda, whereby we seek to create industries in this country that will ramp up manufacturing efforts, to about 15% of the national gross domestic products. And the question is, are we doing the right thing at the right time? Let's take you back to, but let's take you to Mombasa, for the hearing of the Kilifi Deputy Governor case that has been pending there for 2 months. Well, having a small technical issue with that, but let's try to work on it, and thereafter we'll go back. In studio we have John Karani. He's the chair of the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management. We've been having great discussion here in the more, throughout the whole of this morning actually, talking about how to create gainful employment for young people. And the question we're asking ourselves is, do we need to create a Marshall Plan akin to the one that was created by Europe immediately after the World Wars? And we know what they achieved with these. And the issue that we are discussing here was, actually we do not lack beautiful, well-crafted documents, on how to create employment in this country. And this country, we have churned various beautiful and workable documents and policies. But we always fail at the implementation stage. And the question is, how do we ramp up the implementation of all these policies? That's the discussion we've been having here with the chair of KISM, John Karani. And I told you about Twitter handle. Yeah, we got it. At O'Brien Kimani, at KBC Channel 1. I allow you to say your Twitter handle. At
KISM GT. At KISM GT, one word.
At KISM GT, that is one word. So, I mean, I'm just talking about the session on paper number 10.
Yeah.
That was developed in the 1960s actually. To address the issues of poverty, illiteracy, and poor health. And on the poverty levels, the whole document talks about, attracting investment in the industry, in the manufacturing sector, so that we can have multiple companies, setting up their base here in this country. We can nurture companies, locally here. And actually, to some extent, Kenya industrialized at a very fast pace, in the first 10 decades of our independence. But of course, everything fell flat in the 80s. And we have seen, the manufacturing sector, stagnate with its contribution to GDP, currently standing at about 8.79%. Of course, one would argue that Kenya is a bigger economy, with about $100 billion US, with a GDP of $100 billion. But still, that does not hold water. Our plan is to continue or to grow manufacturing from 9% to 15% in the medium term. And the issue is, how do we get it right? Number one, to attract industries, to set up their base here, to expand their operations. And number two, create jobs in this country.
Okay. So there's two thoughts around this, and I want to take you back to a country called South Korea. South Korea, when you think about a plan that was really well executed, this is a country that deliberately and intentionally identified some, I think, 15 key industries that they wanted to play in, key manufacturing hubs. And so they went through a process of saying, how do we support these small SMEs to grow into global companies? So the South Korea model is something I always recommend very strongly for a country like ours and many African countries, where the state created a platform for supporting, intentionally supporting companies that wanted to create several categories, whether it was in agriculture, whether it was in technology, whether within all the spheres of the economy. And that was, and the reason I'm taking us to South Korea case is because South Korea and Kenya were at the same level at independence. So that's a very telling point. So what did they do right that we did not do right? South Korea went through this process of saying, for us to go beyond where we are today, to grow and become a self-sufficient, independent in every way, they created several industries, and the government supported it with a plan that outlived the leadership at that time. So it was not pegged on the leaders in the office at that time. But that's because that's one of the things that we always suffer in our nations in Africa. One leader comes with their own programs, and all the other ones that were there before, they get out of the way. So this South Korean model was so deliberately implemented over the years that today you will find a Samsung phone, almost every other person. This was not always the case. South Korea invested in technology, invested in vehicle manufacturing, invested in other industries that today are global. Whether it's LG, the Samsung thing. So today, because of that deliberate and long-term thinking, they created a long-term view. That basically, so every plan must not be pegged on the term of the leadership in place. It must have a long-term vision, a long-term view that can outlive the leadership, so that at the time and that's how that creates sustainable economies that are today implementable. So I'm taking us there because if we can go back to that drawing board again, we have not backslid too far. We can get back and recalibrate. What we, in economics, we always say is economics of comparative advantage. What do we as Kenya want to be known as? What are we good at, in Kenya, for instance? What are the industries that we want to focus our efforts on? And then we have a proper anchored plan that can be executed over a period of time. And let's not be in a hurry. If we have this short-term view of a 5-year plan, we will not succeed. But if we put it a long-term, 30, 40-year plan, just like the session plan that you just referred to, it had a very good long-term view. If those things could have been implemented to the book, I can tell you the industries that collapse will not be, the Kikomis. And we have to give it to the government today. I'm sure you've seen the president wearing very beautifully colored shirts. Buy Kenya, Build Kenya initiative, which is a brilliant initiative that was there, had actually, if those industries had been sustained. So I think there's a rethink and to revamp those industries, the Rivertex, the Kikomis of this world, so that these industries become sustainable. But it's got to have a long-term view. We've got to look at it as something that will outlive all of us, so that, because Kenya, I'm sure you know this, exports clothes through the AGOA program, exports goods actually through our industrial zone. That tells you that we have the capacity, we have the capability to produce world-class products. All we need is to scale them up. The other thing about sustainable industrial development is actually transitioning family-owned companies into proper companies that are publicly listed. Because the trouble with family-owned businesses is that the owner, who is probably very committed and very dedicated, I don't want to mention any case right now, there are many there. They started by a visionary leader, but because the children don't have the same vision or the same idea like the founding father, as soon as the octogenarians or the fathers exit the scene, what are you left with? With companies that are basically tethering to the brink. And that has actually created a lot of fallen companies. When you don't transition companies from family-owned businesses to public-owned entities that are held in the public trust and that have got the ownership of the public also, that gives it longevity. So all these things are, we will not have lost, I can count them, there are so many companies that we have lost because of family disputes, because they were just family enterprises. They were not national enterprises. So if we can have that long-term view in terms of industry, manufacturing hubs that have got both focus on what is our core competence or what's the best thing we can do as Kenya. When you look at Mombasa, for instance, can they create an industry that adds value to the coconut? So that coconut, because coconut is not just the drink, the husk has value. The whole thing, the whole coconut milk. We can create a whole hub around coconut farming, for instance. I talked about the hides and skins. We can create a whole industry, whether it's the shoes, the leather, and all that. So what are we good at? What do we have the resources at? And all we do in Kenya, and what we don't have today, is actually probably the machinery. But we have the raw materials. We have the people. What can we excel in? What the Tanzania, for instance, doesn't have, that now can become an exportable product. But we must have a long-term view in mind that will help us now anchor all these things on a view that will outlive all of us. and more importantly, translate these brilliant startups from being family-owned to public listed companies. That gives it the governance structures, that gives it the longevity to outlive all of us.
Very well. And I mean, it's very interesting that you're drawing parallels, between Kenya and South Korea and the so-called, the Asian tigers.
The tigers,
the Singapores of this country, and I mean, of this world. And if I can take you back to the issue of South Korea, I mean, the GDP of South Korea in 1960s was at par with the GDP of Kenya.
Exactly.
And interestingly enough, they borrowed a lot, from Kenya's development agenda.
They came here, exactly.
They came here and they saw what we were doing.
Yeah.
They went back to their countries. They tweaked the idea. They upscaled the implementation. And here we are.
Yeah, still.
They have some of the biggest brand when it comes to engineering.
Yeah,
we have the Daewoo's of this world. We have the Samsung of this world. We have the LGs of this world. And look, some of the companies that were started at the same time in this country, they have either collapsed,
forgotten,
they are limping, or they are not even known. And we're talking about, the Sony Sugars of this world, the Mohoroni Sugars of this world, the Uplands Bacon. Who talks about it anymore? and so the question is this. We are also talking about, the special economic zones. And this is a debate that we have been having a long time. And it has the capacity to revolutionize, the job market in this country. But when it comes to implementation, our implementation process is absolutely very, very slow. So how do we hasten and how do we accelerate our implementation process? Because the documents are there, well crafted, beautiful documents with good intentions. But look, here we are.
Still mark timing, unfortunately. Very sad. And again, I did not want to bring you the whole story of the whole Asian tigers, but you brought it very well. And it goes back to what I told you earlier on, having a long-term view in terms of our implementation plan. And more importantly, having measurable deliverables, and then holding people accountable. People fail companies like our company that you just mentioned, and life goes on. Nobody's held accountable. The people put Mohoroni sugar or Uplands bacon into the ground probably are scot-free. And so how do we hold people accountable? Consequences that attract real punity, but people are able to wriggle their way out. They root the company to the ground, but nobody follows them up. So all these things are issues that you cannot legislate. The matters of the heart, for instance, you cannot hold people accountable. I mean, you cannot hold people. You have the laws, but if people don't have the goodwill to absolutely do the right thing, then it's a bit sad. And that's one of the things we must inculcate in our youth. Unfortunately, they're inheriting a culture of you can get away with anything, and that's what we have to change.
An impunity kind of a culture.
Exactly. How can we change, apart from creating jobs for our youth, I really believe the biggest transformation we need is a heart transformation. It's a surgical transformation of the heart that ensures that our youth have the right values, because we are bequeathing to them a very tattered moral fabric. How can we recalibrate that and rejig that so that as we anchor them on a solid foundation in terms of economic empowerment, that will fail if we don't have the right moral authority and the right moral values that will help them stay the test of time. Because that's what these people had. Because people are held accountable in Korea. Presidents are taken to jail. I'm sure you know that story. So anybody that gets out, as long as people get away with anything, we have a culture, because that's where the disconnect really happens. I really personally believe when people can get away with stealing a company with the ground, the next one comes and they will look at what can I get, and before you know it, that company is gone, because you cannot rape a company for 5 years and it survives, and another one comes and continues the same rape issue. So all these are things that have to do with a heart issue. How do we transform our leaders' hearts to know that you are not living for yourself, you're living for a generation. And I'm a man of faith. I always tell them, everything you do here on earth, it will follow you. Right here on earth and in the world to come. If we knew that, so unfortunately the consequence from God comes and we don't see it, but we need to have also man consequence that can be implemented and done here. So all these things tell you that the things that we did right, we did not sustain them. How do we create a sustainable platform for sustainable development that can outlive our generation?
Very well.
And that's a question we need to ask ourselves.
We want to take you to the National Assembly. Well, a section of legislators, are expected to hold a briefing to discuss the planned impeachment of national or transport cabinet secretary James Macharia. They're getting ready, but we seem to be having, the signal there is freezing. Probably it's because of the weather out there. It's absolutely cold. So probably maybe technology is also suffering from these. We're not used to these. But we'll try to work on it, and then we'll get back there. Look at them. If they're ready, led, of course, by Kiharu Member of Parliament, Dende Nyoro. I think that they're about to talk. I think it will be fair enough to listen to them. I think the issue they are discussing is, do I talk without or with a mask? And the jury is out. He's going to talk without the mask. Let's listen.
Tuko set. Asanteni sana kila mtu kukuja kwa hii. We are here as members of parliament, cutting all the political divides and cutting across all the country. Unaona tuko hapa watu ya mirego yote kwa sababu there is a matter that is uniting all of us. Kwa sababu tuliona juzi fitina ya moja wetu here in parliament, Muhammad Ali, against CS Macharia, who has been performing his duties exceedingly diligently. Muhammad Ali ameleta bunge number 1 signatures 90 or purporting to have 90 signatures of members of parliament.
Terrible signal out there. Very bad, actually. It keeps on freezing. Our engineers are working on it. It's quite sad that we're not going to listen to that, but one thing I can assure you for free is at the moment the signal has been stabilized. Definitely dash there and try to get a glimpse of what the members of parliament are discussing there. If I can try to bring the whole thing into perspective, a section of legislators, have come with a plan to impeach Transport Cabinet Secretary James Macharia. They're accusing him of running the docket in an appropriate way. And so the plan is to impeach him and get him out of that docket. I am being told that the signal is stable now. Let's listen.
Manyumba katika nchi ya Kenya, and also the person of the CS Honorable James Macharia. Yeye anafanya kazi na wabunge hawa wote unaona hapa. Actually, wenye tuko hapa ni kwa sababu tumeambiwa na bunge maneno ya social distance. Lazima tukue watu below 20. But the ones who have already signed up to this course are over 150. So Muhammad Ali, we know you don't have numbers. Stop wasting the time of Kenyans and stop wasting the time of this house. Na kwa sababu tuko wengi, ningeomba mimi nimalizie hapo, lakini niite mheshimiwa RK aendelee nena so that you see the actual face of Kenya is here to defend work and is here to defend a person who has been doing his duties.
Well, and the intrigues continue. And the question is, where do we go from here? Where do we stop from here? I mean, this is not the first time, that section of legislators, have hatched up a plan to get James Macharia out of the transport docket. The question is, would they succeed this time around? And the question that we'll be, of course, watching to see whether who has the numbers. According to Kihara, Member of Parliament Dende Nyoro, they have more than 150 legislators, opposing that plan that is being fronted by Mohammed Ali. He's a member of Parliament for, is it Muvita? If I get it right here.
Mvita, yes.
I mean, Nyali. Mvita, Nyali. We have so many constituencies, one keeps on confusing. But he's a member of Parliament for Nyali. And he says he has about 90 signatures from legislators. The question is he going to push through with that plan? Ndidi Nyoro says it's bound to fail from the word go. But we'll see and definitely help you understand. Let's continue with our discussion here. We're not talking about impeachment here. We're talking about job creations. It's the most important aspect of our discussion this morning. We have talked so much, what we need to do as a country, who needs to do what, who needs to be held accountable, the documents that we have created as a country in a bid to help with job creation and, of course, the industrialization agenda. And the question is, where do we move from here? Where do we become the Singapore of Africa, the South Korea of Africa? That is the big question. We have the intentions, the plans are there, well laid out. The human, or what you call the human capital is also there. You see, when you talk to UNESCO, they will tell you that the literacy levels in Kenya is about 81%. It's actually one of the highest in Africa. I think it would be number 3 or 4 if I'm not wrong. And the issue has always been, how do we capitalize on the human labor aspect in Kenya? And it's one of the best in Africa. So, John Karani, he has been with us this morning. I mean, he's been helping us to put all things into perspective. He's the chairperson of the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management. So, John, for a country with a literacy level of about 81% or 82%, so how comes we don't get things right when it comes to, creating the right jobs for the right people?
So as you've correctly stated, it's not for lack of resources. It's not for lack of capability. It's not for lack of literacy, as you correctly put it.
Yeah.
It is, again, that aspect that I said, that morality issue. If you have very educated people that are that are not doing the right thing,
yeah.
You're basically telling yourself that you got a lot of educated people who can do wrong things.
Yeah.
So, again, I want to take you back to that South Korea model again. Impunity was not tolerated. And there's something that, let's not even go to South Korea. There's something in our neighborhood that's happening that will be very surprised very soon. Ethiopia. Ethiopia is, I don't want to blow their trumpet, but that's a giant that's going to take off. Because they are doing some things right. Again, much as they have their own corruption also, but people actually, there are consequences for corruption practices in Ethiopia. And you can see that increasingly people are being held accountable there. And that's one aspect that I keep saying, accountability, accountability, accountability is not happening here in Kenya. People are not punished for misappropriating resources. People are not facing consequences for their actions. So that story that I told you earlier on of South Korea, which transitioned from being a predominantly agricultural economy, by the way. I think at independence, they were almost at the same level, like maybe 50-60% dependent on agriculture.
Yep.
But they had a deliberate intention to create, again, value addition in the agriculture with the intention of eventually exporting their products. So export orientation, which comes from value addition. So all this tells you two things. Like I said earlier on, you cannot legislate matters of morality. You can put them on paper, but they are taken, they are individually driven. So values, and I think we have got in Kenya we've got a code of ethics and national values. We actually have that. How it gets translated to action is where the disconnect always happens. And because we have got a history of almost, 50 years, where people get away with anything. So you reach a stage where people are always thinking, how can I do this and get away with it? How can I do this and get away with it? Not how can I do the right thing and leave a legacy. So the aspect, therefore, is of translating our very brilliant plans to action plans and making sure that these things actually translate to results is something we have to, it's a dialogue that's been going on for the longest time. So we need to reach a stage where people know that there is serious punitive measures. And this probably means that, but we also have to implement it from the top. It always starts at the top to the bottom, because when you have, and people see CEOs and MDs getting away with murder, even the employees, the messengers will try to steal steal tires. A sad story the other day of people at Kenya Airways, for instance, trying to get away with aeroplane tires. You don't know where they're taking those ones. But all this tells you that when you have the moral fabric of the society is rotten, nothing really can go ahead until we get that stage of where we are really morally working to do the right thing. These countries that do the right thing are not necessarily, it's not Christian values, by the way, much as that's important. South Korea, it's got a lot of Buddhist, religion, for instance, but they do the right. They hold each other accountable. It's primarily a Buddhist country. They're not really. We, as in Kenya, we are actually 80% Christian. So all these things, it means that we have them, we know them, but we deliberately don't do it. So it's a journey we have to travel. It's a hard discussion we have to have with ourselves, with each one of us individually, in your own heart. It comes down to me. If I am doing this thing, what am I thinking about? Am I thinking about anybody else? It's just about me alone, numero uno. So we have to start with self-search question. What can I do within my sphere of influence to make sure that I'm doing the right thing? Because at the end of the day, it comes to the right thing individually and corporately and as a nation now. That's the only way we can
So it's like you're bringing in the issue of patriotism.
Patriotism, exactly. That's
it has to come into
when you
play.
really love your country and you want to bequeath to the next generation a better Kenya than you found it, then you'll have a motive to do the right thing all the time, even when nobody's watching you.
We talk about Kenya being a country of innovation. Somebody said that this is a country, is a hub of innovation in Africa.
Absolutely, it is.
And you have, fresh graduates, coming out of school every year, and the number keeps on rising. Almost now 1 million people, graduating from colleges and universities, armed with fresh ideas, new ideas, new approach to things and all this much. Is it that they're not given an opportunity, or they get into the labor market and then they find they fall into this culture of laziness, or what actually happens?
The opportunities, I think, are very difficult to get for young people, really. When you think about it, those brilliant ideas. I said, whether it's financial opportunity to put their idea into action, that's probably the biggest one. Capital. How do you come with a brilliant idea, but you don't have anybody to hold your hand, for instance, because what do you call it? For you to take a loan, there's a lot of collateral. You don't have it, so that becomes an immediate roadblock. Talk of employment. You're told you must have 3, 4, 5 years experience. You've just come from college, brilliant thoughts. Where do you get the experience unless somebody gives you a chance? So that aspect you just said, not giving our youth the opportunity to experiment and to fail, because we also failed. We got somebody who held our hand and took us through the ropes, but are we willing to get our youth to come in, even if we just give them a small allowance? It's very hard to get internship in this country, for instance. That culture that we had when we were younger, you had apprenticeship. People go into manufacturing hubs and they learn the tools of the trade. It's not just technology, it's also mechanical work, the manufacturing area. How can we create that? We used to have a lot of polytechnics actually, and I think before the university culture came and swept away this, they call them diploma level, higher national diploma, they used to be called. How can we create, and I think increasing, now they have done it, they have started doing that, they call it TVET, Technical Institute, which is now beginning to recalibrate so that we get people to learn skills. Even when straight from university, you can still go to a place where you can, a hub for instance, where people learn basic skills, whether it's managerial skills or any skill that can help you go into the, because that's the biggest area. We don't give our youth opportunities. Either they are not there or they are not enough. So that lack of opportunity to experiment, to bring to the fore is a real issue, whether it's financial opportunity, whether it is employment opportunity, to try out your skill set, to try out your brilliant thoughts that you have, or the capital to put into action your brilliant idea. That's a big hindrance. Of course, there are other issues that are a hindrance, whether it's, we can talk about them later, but those are the two main ones, financial and the opportunity just to be an intern, for instance, to be mentored. And that's what we need to do more. We don't have enough mentoring hubs. We don't have enough hubs for technological. I think we've started now talking about iHub or technology hubs, for instance. How can we expand all those things so that our youth have an opportunity to actually experiment and fail and try and fail and try, because that's the only way they can learn and test their technology.